All right, welcome to the Explainer. Today we're taking a massive journey to the absolute bottom of our beautiful blue planet. We're talking about a place that has literally pushed human endurance to its limits, sparked some intense international rivalries, and, believe it or not, in the digital age, it's become the ultimate blank canvas for some of the most mind-bending, incredibly detailed collaborative mythology you'll ever see. We're going to explore the extreme, cold hard facts of the seventh continent, Antarctica. And then we're going to cross the ice wall into the wild internet lords inspired. So here's our game plan for today. First, the cold hard reality. Second, who owns the ice? Third, the galactic snowman theory. Fourth, beyond the ice wall. And finally, number 5, where science meets myth. Okay, let's jump straight into section 1, the cold hard reality, a desert made of ice. So what truly lies at the very bottom of the world? Let's strip away all the myths for a second and look at the raw geographical facts, because honestly, they sound completely alien all on their own. Just imagine looking at the very bottom of a globe. You've got this expanse of millions of square miles, and it is utterly, profoundly isolated. It's actually the only continent on Earth with absolutely zero native human population. No indigenous tribes who've lived there for millennia, no native government, nothing. It just sits down there at a latitude of -69.6 and a longitude of 0, functioning as this pristine, frozen giant. And you know, the reason humans don't natively live there really comes down to brutal, unforgiving numbers. -89.2 degrees Celsius. That is the absolute lowest temperature ever recorded by humanity, measured back in July of 1983. And it's not just the bone-chilling cold that wants you gone. This is also literally the windiest place on Earth. We're talking blinding snowstorms whipping across the ice at devastating speeds of up to 300 kilometers per hour. But here's a crazy paradox for you. Even though it holds roughly 72% of the entire world's fresh water locked up in its ice, Antarctica is technically a desert. It only gets a measly 51 millimeters of precipitation a year. In fact, to put that into perspective, there are barren regions there that haven't seen a single solitary drop of rain in 14 million years. When any moisture does manage to fall, it pretty much always turns to snow before it even hits the ground. And the geographic oddities just keep coming. There are exactly 0 official time zones in Antarctica. Because all the longitude lines on Earth converge right at the South Pole, time essentially loses its meaning down there. And to make things even more dramatic, because the surrounding ocean freezes over seasonally, the continent physically expands in the winter. It literally grows to become a landmass larger than the entirety of Russia. It's like this breathing, freezing behemoth at the bottom of the map. Right, moving on to section 2, who owns the ice, treaties and territories. Now, with a landmass this massive, and potentially packed with resources, human nature inevitably steps in, right? Geopolitical tension has actually been building up for centuries, from the very first confirmed sightings around 1820 to the first undisputed landing in 1895. But as countries rushed to claim their own slice of the ice, Cold War tensions really started to heat up. This tension eventually led to the monumental 1959 Antarctic Treaty, which essentially froze all territorial claims and turned the whole continent into a neutral zone meant strictly for peaceful scientific research. Later on, the 1991 Madrid Protocol stepped in to ban any oil drilling or mining. But here's the catch. This treaty is set to expire in 2048, and that raises a massive geopolitical question. What happens when the world's endless hunger for resources collides with a thawing continent? So, while the treaty is in place right now, these territorial claims are mostly symbolic, but they are absolutely still drawn on the map. Australia, for instance, claims a staggering 42% of the landmass. Over on the Antarctic Peninsula, you've got the UK, Chile, and Argentina, and their claims actually overlap, which creates a lot of friction on paper. But honestly, the most fascinating detail to me is Marie Byrd Land. This specific sector is the largest single territory on planet Earth that is completely unclaimed by any sovereign nation. It's just this massive political void. And, you know, it's precisely that massive, empty void that completely supercharges human imagination. Even thousands of years ago, ancient Greek philosophers like Plato speculated about an unknown southern land. They thought there had to be a counterbalance to the north, maybe even hiding a lost advanced civilization. Because Antarctica is essentially a giant blank white canvas where ordinary citizens really aren't allowed to just freely roam, the human mind rushes in to fill all that emptiness. And that leads us perfectly into the modern internet era's version of Plato's speculation. Which brings us to section 3, the galactic snowman theory. The lore begins. All right, buckle up because we're officially leaving the world of documented science and diving headfirst into the wild realm of speculative internet lore. We're not looking at this as fact, obviously, but rather as an absolutely incredible masterclass in modern, collaborative world building and digital mythology. According to this massively popular Beyond the Ice Wall lore, our Earth isn't just a globe floating alone in space, and no, it's not a flat disk either. Instead, it's structured like a colossal galactic snowman named Gaia. In this theory, the Earth we know and love sits right at the top, like the head. If you travel south past the Antarctic ice wall, you drop down onto a second, much larger planet called Atlas. And if you go even further south, way past the borders of Atlas, you hit the massive bottom sphere called Akupara. And Akupara is so astronomically huge, it literally requires two entirely different suns to orbit it. Now, the physics of this fictional universe are governed by a constant cosmic tug-of-war between two elements, ether and azoth. Ether is most concentrated right up at the top of the snowman, right here on Earth. It stabilizes reality, keeps physics normal, and totally suppresses magic. But as you travel down to Atlas and Akupara, the ether thins out and azoth takes over. Azoth is pure, limitless magical energy. It's a really clever way for the creators to explain why our world is stuck with strict laws of nature, while the worlds beyond the ice are chaotic, magical, and totally untamed. Next up is Section 4, Beyond the Ice Wall. Navigating the gates. So how exactly do explorers in this fictional universe pass from our boring mundane Earth down into the terrifying magical world of Atlas? Well, the lore says there are 4 primary breaks in the ice wall, and they operate almost exactly like levels in a fantasy RPG. First up, you have the Sentinel Gate. Picture a swampy marshland heavily guarded by hyper-aggressive 2.5-meter-tall penguins. Yeah, you heard that right. Then to the west, there's the Tiger's Gate. This is a brutal volcanic terrain where native tribes fight these massive, saber-tooth-like tigers in gladiatorial combat. Over in the east is Leviathan's Gate, which is basically a treacherous, jagged waterway just completely teeming with giant sea monsters and ancient marine reptiles. And finally, the Serpent's Gate to the north. That one's full of massive stalagmite plains ruled by giant labyrinthian sea snakes. Each gate is essentially a terrifying, unique barrier, keeping you from the unknown. And that brings us to our final stop, Section 5, where science meets myth, the continents of Atlas. Let's say fiction's brave explorers actually survive those gates and ascend down to the planet Atlas. What do they actually find? Well, the bizarre, sprawling civilizations that internet writers have mapped out are nothing short of wild. What's super fascinating is how this lore actually borrows from real ancient folklore to create something completely fresh. For example, meet the Blames. They're the native inhabitants of a massive island cluster called Zenonia. According to the story, way back in 1200 BC, this terrifying alien named Spoth showed up and tried to rule the native human tribes through, well, brutal decapitations. But over centuries in this horrific environment, human evolution adapted. The result? The Blames. Incredibly muscular, headless beings with their facial features integrated right into their torsos. Today, in the lore at least, Spoth is fled and the Blims just live peacefully in this vibrant cultural paradise. And let's take a quick look at a few more of these incredible speculative continents, because the scale here is just mind-blowing. First is Thoth. It's entirely inhabited by the descendants of Old Norse and South American explorers, but the crazy part is the continent itself physically moves. It makes a full rotation around the planet every 1,500 years. Then there's Jinya, a sprawling landmass where literally everything, from the mountains down to the animals, exist in exact identical pairs. And finally, you've got Aten. This is an absurdly wealthy magical fairy tale land populated by gnomes and goblins. The landscape there is so pristine and beautiful that even the blowing winds naturally sound like a grand harmonized orchestra. So, what does this all mean? From the very real geopolitical maneuvering of superpowers eyeing a 2048 treaty expiration, to internet writers meticulously mapping out the evolutionary history of torso-faced aliens, Antarctica serves one singular, undeniable purpose for humanity. It is the great unknown. And it really begs the question, doesn't it? When we finally run out of actual physical space to conquer and explore, does human nature simply invent entirely new universes to satisfy our curiosity? Whether it's the cold hard science of extreme survival or the sprawling digital mythology of the galactic snowman, Antarctica is always going to be our greatest canvas. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and we'll see you in the next explainer.